Good afternoon, dear international family. I hope you're all adapting quickly to the new normal after the reopening. My name is Iman Al-Haji, and I'm the President of Students for Sustainability, also known as Square at KAUST. We are super excited to host the fourth episode of Sustainability Seminar Series, which is a platform for raising scientific engagement in the complexity of sustainability. This initiative was brought by Square with the support of the Head of Sustainability and the Graduate Affairs at KAUST. Our topic for today is Microbial Revolution in the Future of Crops by our distinguished speaker, Paola Bonfante. Paola Bonfante is a professor emerita in the Department of Life Science and System Biology, University of Taranto, Italy. She is highly cited researcher in the biology of plant microorganisms interactions and on their impact of environmental and agriculture sustainability. Professor Bola is named a world expert and top Italian scientist, ranking 3 of the topology natural sciences. To name a few of her achievements, Professor Bola served as a member of the Scientific Committee for Research Activities of the Toronto from 2014 to 2019, and as a member of the Scientific Committee of CNR from 2012 to 2016. Professor Paola also served as an editor to several academic journals such as Environmental Microbiology, Microorganism, and as an evaluator for scientific agencies such as the European and American Science Foundation and Finnish Academy. She is a fellow of Academy of Sciences of Toronto, Academy of Agriculture of Toronto, Academy of Roma, Academy of Agriculture, France, Paris, Academy of European MIE. We feel very honored to have her with us today. Please feel free to write your questions during the speak, and the floor is yours, Professor Paula. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks so much for the introduction, Iman. It is really a great pleasure and honor for me to be here again at your university and to join your sustainability seminar. And for that, really, I would like to thank you, Iman Halaji and Justine Braghi, for your very, very kind invitation. Today, I would like to start with this triangle. Since everybody of us under these difficult COVID times have really understood that our health as human beings depend on environment. And the same is true for plants. And indeed, we have to support the concept of One Health, since it is crucial to understand that this One Health links our destiny as human beings with the environment and with the plants. But since, for example, plants are providing food for us, but there is also another very, very important word that we have to consider speaking about sustainability, and this is agriculture. Since agriculture is really one of the crucial human activity which have an important impact on environment, human beings, and plants. And for that, I would like to start from the past. And first of all, I would like to remember something that probably every of you knows quite well. I mean that agriculture started the moment of the Neolithic revolution, more or less 10,000 years ago, when men moved from a lifestyle of hunting and gathering to become a farmer and to have a settlement mood. And where this happened? This happened not so far from us, in the Fertile Crescent, which is closed between the Mediterranean Sea and the Persian Gulf. And this is quite important to understand that at that moment, wheat and barley were already available. Also, thanks to the fact that at that moment, 10,000 years ago, the climate was becoming warmer. And indeed, for example, we have a very, very nice demonstration, remnants of this Neolithical revolution, since, for example, there is this beautiful site, archaeological site of Tel Abu Huraira, where there are many, many remnants of the first farmer activities. And for example, you can also see these beautiful stones where these ancient farmers were used to grind the cereals by using the smaller stones, and all of these remnants of these ancient activities are still conserved in the museum. So the interesting point is that the history of agriculture has raised a lot of attention, and there are many, many books which have devoted a lot of attention to this issue. For example, I would like to suggest you this book that probably you have already read, Guns, Germs and Steel, written by an English scientist, Jared Diamond. And for me, the interesting point in this book is that it also introduces the other important actors of my conversation today. I mean, the fact that at the moment we know a lot of a huge number of plant species. We know that there are more or less 400,000 plant species on the land. But the crucial point is that only a small number of them feeds the world. We say that these plants, which may feed around 80–90% of the people, are around 10, 12 plants: maize, wheat, rice, cassava, banana. And you may find very interesting places, websites where you may learn a lot about these plants. But first of all, just to introduce a bit of science inside, I would like to show you this very nice picture, which was published past year by these two colleagues, Fernie and Young, in Molecular Plants. Where you can see the map of our planet, and you can see that each of these top crops is located in their place of origin. So you can see that, of course, the Fertile Crescent is a very important one, but there are also other important places which originated these top crops. For example, East South Asia, rice, for example, is coming from there. Or if we look at South and Middle America, you can see that this was the origin place for a lot of important crops, from maize to potato to tomato. But when we look at the crops that we are eating today, we are immediately aware of the fact that the phenotype, for example, of a tomato today is very different from the ancestor of a tomato. This tomato, this Solanum pimpinellifolium, is still present in Peru, but its size, as you can see, is very reduced in comparison with our today tomato. And which is the reason of this strong change. This is due to the big work of the breeders that during 10,000 years of agriculture, they had performed a very strong genetic selection. And at the end, we now, for example, speaking about tomato here in Italy, we have dozens and dozens of different tomatoes, which are very diverse for shape, size, color, and also for their aroma. And so everything is really due to the activity, to the genetic selection, which has been done during the long years of agriculture. But the same is true for maize. Maybe you know that the ancestor of maize is teosinte. Teosinte is still now present in Mexico, but the current maize is again the result of all these years of genetic selection, which has been done during the plant domestication, which has led to these important genetic changes. So the first point that I would like to summarize after these slides is that it is clear that during the 10,000 years of agriculture, we have now a lot of plants which are our food, but which are also the results of human breeding. It is clear that most of these plants are not present in nature, but they are really the result of human activity. But the second point that I would like to stress is the fact that agriculture is really a human activity, which has an important impact on our planet, on planet sustainability, since and this event is really very important now, today, much more than in the past. For example, if you are looking now at what happens in the forest in Brazil, you can see these huge, impressive, deforested areas. For example, here you can see the impact, and then these big trees which have been cut, and all these areas are now used for agriculture, mostly devoted to the livestock activities. And therefore, it is clear that if we think at our situation today, we have really to understand the relationship which exists between agriculture, society, and planet, our Earth sustainability. And there is another crucial point that I have to introduce a bit, since this provide us the basis to understand the current agriculture style. And this event can be identified with the Green Revolution. The Green Revolution, which around the 1960s really changed the world. So we can a bit summarize the result of the Green Revolution with this picture, whether you can admire these fields with a strongly automated use of a machine, providing highly productive crops. And on the other part of the slides, you can see what is happening, for example, in sub-Saharan countries, where the Green Revolution did not reach a success. So what is happening, which is the person who is credited as the father of the Green Revolution. The name of this father of Green Revolution is Norman Borlaug, an agronomist, an American agronomist. He was an expert in the genetics of wheat and rice. and he's considered the person who has saved more than 1 billion people from starvation, and for that he was awarded with the Nobel Peace Prize in 1970. So, but which was the crucial idea and of Norman Borlaug. He was the first to demonstrate that the selection of crop varieties which were sensitive to fertilizers like nitrogen, phosphate, potassium could increase the productivity of these crops. And indeed, if you give a look at these graphs, you can see really some unbelievable results. Indeed, starting from the 60s, when as it is shown in this country, in Mexico, India, Pakistan, you treat some specific cultivars of wheat, varieties of wheat with not only with fertilizers, but also with herbicides, with pesticides, you can really reach a very, very high productivity. So this was really a very important change in the agriculture. It was really considered a true revolution. And indeed, you can see how this revolution has a really very important impact, not only from a scientific and applicative point of view, but also from a technical and social points of view. And indeed, the main applications of green revolution were based on some innovations. And the innovations were, first of all, I was trying to explain you before, the selection of some hybrid varieties, the use of fertilizers, of herbicides and pesticides. But this was mirrored by the development of a new machine, and also by the fact that many of these varieties required a lot of water. And so this also required a lot of new system of irrigation, new machine, new system for the distribution of crops. But also the social impacts was really very important, not only as far as concerned the distribution of the food, but also as far as concerned, for example, the people employed in agriculture. In Italy, it is quite impressive. Before the Green Revolution, more than 50% of the people was working in agriculture, and now no more than 9–10%. And also the cost of the food. Before the Green Revolution, the food was really very, very expensive. And for example, again in Italy, a family was used to spend about the 60% of income. By contrast, now the cost for food is around the 20–25%. So the consequences of the Green Revolution were really very, very, very important. And first of all, of course, this is ensured by the quantity of calories which are guaranteed by this new typology of agriculture, since we know that in this moment the basis of the calories are, which is more or less 1,080–100 calories a day, are ensured for a lot of people with some problems, as we will see later in Africa and other small areas of the world. And but of course, as we know quite well, nothing is without a cost. And indeed, this today's intensive agriculture, which is the direct daughter of the Green Revolution of the 60s, has originated very distinct and clear environmental impacts. soil erosion, water pollution, in addition to the use of a large quantity of water, exhaustion of micronutrients, really due also to this problem of excess of fertilizers, biodiversity decline, and also big problems of obesity. And on the other hand, we know that the problem of hunger is not completely solved, since we know that at least 1 billion people are chronically hungry also today. And so this is another important problem. And at this point, I would like to read with you this proverb, which probably is a Turkish proverb, but I am not so sure about the origin. But it is a proverb that I like really so much. And as you can read, a man who has food has many problems. A man who has no food has only one problem. And indeed, if we give a look at some figures, for example, these figures which are present in this website. I do not know whether you know this website, that is really very, very interesting, since you can see all the figures changing in a simultaneous way, mirroring the current situation. So, for example, as I checked 2 days ago, the current world population is just close to 8 billion of people. And we have also all the figures concerning the birth and the deaths, or during the year or during the day. But what it is interesting is that if we give a look at what is happening as far as concerns the food, we see that there is a huge number of undernourished people in the world today, but the number of overweight people is more or less the double. So this gives immediately you the feeling of asymmetry of a situation when we are speaking about agriculture, society, sustainability, food security. There is a strong asymmetry. And also, if we look at the figures concerning the environment, we immediately can perceive how it is important the changes which are impacting on our green treasures as the forest. We can see how it's important the land lost due to the soil erosion. What is the impressive figure of a CO2 emission or the desertification? And so it is clear that indeed we have this strict relationship between, as I try to show you in the triangle with which I have started my story. And if so the question is really to understand which is the role of agriculture, and we can see that agriculture indeed has a quite interesting role, since the role of agriculture is mostly focused on the production of the methane and the nitrous oxide, and these gases which are important in the global climate changes are mostly related to the livestock activities, so are a second level related to the agriculture activities. The first level is the crop production, and the second the livestock activity. So it is clear that at this moment we have really to do some question, to put some question, and to try to understand what we can do. So First of all, I would like to quote an organization which is really doing a lot of very, very interesting activities, which is the Food and Agriculture Organization. Since this organization has really developed a very nice vision, first of all, FAO has really done a lot of activities to ensure that the food is accessible for everyone. So this really involves the issue of the food security. Food security means that the food has to be accessible for everyone. But this requires that natural resources are managed in a way that maintains ecosystem functions to support current as well as future human needs. So this really means that this food security has to be performed in a sustainable pattern, in a sustainable way. So surely this FAO is doing great work, also thinking at the current situation in our planet. For example, maybe you remember that in January of this year, Australia was impacted by a terrible heat wave, and this has had a very, very strong negative impact on the environment. And in the meantime, in the same month, there were terrible flooding events in the South Asia. So the idea is really, but what we can do. And so at this point, I would like to remember that researchers, that scientists are really trying to take care of the situation and to develop strategies for the future of crops. For example, there is a very interesting paper published past year in Nature by some very famous scientists, and they try to list all the different strategies that scientists may develop thinking of these climate changes, and in the meantime of the necessity to develop sustainable approaches. So first of all, for example, they list the abiotic stresses which may have an impact in the crop's productivity. And as you can see in these different maps, they have identified aridity stress, nutrient stress, heat, and flood events, exactly as the situations that happened indeed in our planet some months after, in January. And the important point is that many different strategies have been developed, developing, of course, the plant genetics. We know that plant genetics have done really very, very important steps and have reached the important goals, not only by using and by building genetically modified plants, but also by using all the genome of plants which have been sequenced in the very recent years. And so by using all this new data, many different genome editing approaches have been developed, as well as approaches based on the so-called assisted selection. And so by using all these different genetics tools, we know that at the moment there is the possibility to have a drought and stress resistant plant, to have plants which require lower quantity of water and fertilizer, plants which are resistant to pathogens, and also plants which have more nutritional products. And so These are really all the goals that society wants to reach. But as you know, many of these plants which are based on genetically modified plants are not fully accepted in some countries. And so there are also other scientists who are looking under a diverse perspective. For example, they are looking at the possibility to use perennial plants. And here I am showing you one of the so far more interested perennial plants, which is this Cancer, which is a domesticated version of wild relative wheat. And there are some very interesting experiments now running in America, in the States. And the idea is that these perennial plants require less water and have a less strong impact on soil, so the soil is more protected with these perennial plants, which also require less fertilizer. So this could be really a strategy. So the idea is that we can really think of the fact that the highly intensive agriculture based on fertilizers, on pesticides, on the huge quota of water has to be integrated with other approaches since it is no more sustainable. And so we can really think of different approaches based on plant genetics, as I showed you in a very quick way. But there is also another opportunity which is given by microbes, by natural beneficial microbes. And this is what at the moment is called the microbial revolution. And I would like to give you some ideas on the possibility to use microbes. Everything is stemming, is rising from the concept that surely no plant is an island. I love this sentence, which is derived from poetry called "No Man is an Island," as John Donne wrote in many years ago. And it is clear, we know quite well, that plants live inside the network of interactions. They live together with other plants, but also they live together with small animals and with a lot of microbes. And the concept of microbes has stemmed a new field of research called microbiota biology, microbiota research, which is really something which has changed a lot of biology. Since it is currently very important in medical schools, for example, since it is clear that the whole set of microorganisms, which are bacteria, fungi, viruses, live in associations with humans, animals, and plants, and they may influence a lot of activities due to the fact that all of these microorganisms possess some genetic information, and which is called microbiome. So the concept, which is at the moment very important in medical school, is that microbiota represent our second genome, and that in our body we have a high ratio of microbes when we compare them with our human cells. And it is clear that the microbiota is important not only for nutrition, and this is clear, but also for immunity. And also in this moment, people speak about the so-called gut-brain axis, meaning that our gut functioning has also a lot of effects on brain and behavior. And so this is really something of very important, and the main journals, Nature and Science, are used to devote a lot of room to papers dealing with microbiota. The interesting point is that exactly the same situation is true for plants, since if we are looking at the plant organs where we can find a lot of microbes, for example, here in the around the roots, but also in the leaves. And then we compare with the microbiota present in human beings, we immediately see a lot of differences. For example, from a taxonomical point of view, the bacterial communities here are quite far from the bacterial communities which are present in our body. But the interesting point is that the processes which are at the basis of both the microbiota share very common points. For example, both plant and human microbiota are involved in nutrient acquisition, in the optimal development of the organs, but mostly on the defense against pathogenic microbes. And therefore, they really raise the immunity of both in plants, both in humans. So for that, it is clear that it is quite important to think of microbes as important tools for the plant health. And indeed, with the success of next generation sequencing approaches, the plant microbiota has been studied in with great attention. And for example, here you can see that the plant is surrounded not only by bacteria, but also by algae and by other protists, nematodes, fungi, and also the main important bacterial and fungal taxa have been identified. And so we know as for each plant we can identify a specific microbiota. And since we know that all these microbes may have different strategies, they can be also pathogenic, of course, exactly as it happens in our gut, but also we have many beneficial microbes. So in this slide, I have identified some of the most important beneficial microbes which are present in the soil. So first of all, the microbes which can fix nitrogen. And so this play really a very important role, but also the other microbes which are called plant growth promoting microbes, and also them live in the soils and became associated to the plants. And then we have fungi like the mycorrhizal fungi, and I will say something in a couple of minutes, and also some fungal endophytes which are now largely used as beneficial endophytes, trichoderma or serendipita. And so we have a lot of beneficial microbes. And first of all, I would like to say a couple of words as far as concern this nitrogen fixing rhizopia, which have the extraordinary capacity to fix nitrogen, atmospheric nitrogen. And indeed, these bacteria which can fix atmospheric nitrogen are really of great relevance, since they can produce ammonia, and therefore they release ammonia directly to the plant, exactly as a fertilizing activity. But they need that the plants produces this special pink organs which are called nodules. And this requires a very, very complex interaction, a very complex symbiotic interactions, since it is important that the bacterium and the plant communicate, exchange molecules just to understand each other, and only at this point the bacterium enter inside the root and the nodule, this novel organ, is developed, and at this point the bacterium has the capacity to fix the nitrogen, and this is really a quite important aspect. And just to say, people who are working on this issue, like this Eva Condorozzi, a fantastic scientist working both in France and in Hungary, was awarded with a very important prize, really important for the society, since, as you have understood, to investigate this symbiosis means that you can help plants to get biofertilizing activity without a further impact for the soil. And this is also very interesting also from a market point of view, since these bacteria are at the center of many microbial inocula, and you can look at this. It is really quite a surprising aspect that a patent by using this bacteria was already available 2 centuries ago, before that the Haber-Bosch procedure, which is the procedure which produces ammonia under industrial environment, was invented. In fact, you can see that this Haber-Bosch procedure was awarded with a Nobel Prize starting of the 20th century. Well, but the interesting point is that these microbial inocula are largely used today, but there are also some novel aspects. For example, in these experiments, which was performed on soybean, a new inocula was used where not only the bacteria were applied, but also the node factor. Do you remember that I told you that plants and rhizobia communicate thanks to a bacterial molecule, the node factor, and if you apply the node factor even in the absence of a bacterium, there is a very, very strong increase in the productivity of a soybean. So this means that theoretical research, the results of science, can be applied and used also for the market, getting very important results. But I would like also to show you some new scenarios which are coming from a very interesting project entitled Engineered Nitrogen Symbiosis for Africa. And the leader scientist is Professor Giles Oldroyd from Cambridge University, the project funded by Melinda Bill Gates Foundation. So the idea, as I told you before, is that this so powerful symbiosis between the rhizobia, the nitrogen-fixing bacteria, and legumes is under natural conditions limited to legumes. So the idea in this project is to try to understand whether it is possible to extend this capacity to cereals. And this could be very, very important for Africa, where many farmers cannot buy fertilizers, and so their crop yields is very limited in comparison to a field where you apply nitrogen fertilizers. So the idea of Giles Oldroyd is really to develop this very innovative and surely challenging project, where first of all he has to engineer the perception of nitrogen fixing bacteria, and all the other steps are really very, very probably difficult to reach. But anyway, this is a quite stimulating project, and really we have to think of a new agriculture, thinking of these new possibilities. But there is also other example. For example, I like a lot these experiments which was published past year in Nature Biotechnology. The experiments were performed by some Chinese colleagues, and you probably know that we have two very important cultivars of rice, Japonica and Indica, and they studied the microbiota associated to these two rice cultivars, and they found that the microbiota was very diverse. As you can see, this is the microbiota of Indica, and this is the microbiota of Japonica. So the composition of the bacterial communities is quite diverse. But what was interesting was that in the presence of this microbiota present in Indica, there was a strong stimulation of rice nitrate sensor and transporter of this gene, which was leading to a strong activation of nitrogen metabolism. And by doing many other experiments, by developing some mutants, and by also constructing synthetic communities, they clearly demonstrated that some of the bacteria present here were capable of stimulating growth promotion of the plants, mostly in Indica. And so, in my opinion, this is really a quite important paper, since it gives us some ideas for new breeding opportunities where the microbiota has to consider it, and before, this was never done before. Lastly, I would like to say, as I already told you, that in the plant microbiota consists not only of bacterial communities, but also fungal communities. And among the fungal communities, we know that there are a lot of fungi which live associated to the plants and which have many beneficial impacts. And among them, surely the so-called mycorrhizal fungi are really very, very important. Of course, for people who is not involved in this type of research, I would like to say that mycorrhizal fungi are the fungi which live in strict association with plants' roots. They are present in more than 90% of the land plants, and basically we can say that the fungus provide a lot of mineral elements to the plant, while the plant provide reduced carbon to the fungus. And the interesting point is that this mycorrhization is really a very important ecological process. So we have to be aware that all the plant communities that we look with our eyes are really controlled by the mycorrhizal associations which are present below in the soil, where we cannot directly see the effects of these fungi which are associated to the plants. And so probably this explains this, what we call the pervasive power of mycorrhizas, which are present more or less everywhere. But what I would like to show you is that surely when we are speaking of some of these mycorrhizal fungi, these arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi, there is much more than a nutrient exchange between the plant and the fungi. Since if the fungi are here in the soil, so hidden, we cannot see at these fungi, see these fungi. By contrast, we can immediately perceive a lot of systemic responses where, for example, we have an increased resistance to pathogens, an increased drought tolerance, and everything of this happens due to the exchanges which are established here in the roots of these mycorrhizal plants. And indeed, during the years, we have immediately perceived that most of the crops that we are used to eat are mycorrhizal plants, maybe with the exception of this broccoli, but all the other are mycorrhizal plants. So we are really interested in trying to better understand the positive impact of these mycorrhizal fungi on these important crops, on these crops that, as I have shown you before, are really feeding the world. And for example, just to give you a quick example, when we mycorrhized these wheat plants with different herbuscular mycorrhizal fungi, immediately we observed that there was a strong increased productivity in the growth of the plants, but also there was an impact on the spike. And so this was really quite interesting on the seed production, and also all the different agronomic traits could be well evaluated, and also the resistance to some pathogens. So we have really the idea that these mycorrhizal fungi can be quite interesting tools. And there are also at the moment just new experiments in the field. For example, in Colombia, where a colleague from Switzerland has done huge experiments together with Alia Rodriguez by using manioca. And also there are some interesting experiments done by a colleague of mine here in Piedmont. Here is the cassava, and here in Piedmont, where this colleague of mine applied the chitooligosaccharide, again the molecule which is perceived by the plant and released by the mycorrhizal fungi. But of course, we have to do a lot of things to apply these beneficial microbes, and therefore, before moving to this microbial revolution, since first of all, we have to take care of the natural variation of the different cultivars, we have really to identify the perfect, the best match between the plant and the microbe. But therefore, just to arrive to the conclusion, I would like to stress the concept that in this moment, thinking of sustainability, we have really to overcome a strongly productive agriculture, which is mostly based on the use of water, of fertilizer, of pesticides, since surely this type of agriculture is no more considered sustainable for our planet. But we have to find diverse integrated approaches. I have no doubts that probably one solution is not working, and so we have to use all this type of positive impact, integrating them with all of what we have learned by applying plant genetics, by using all of the different results which are coming from the genome sequencing, and first of all, the application of genome editing. And surely another important natural resource is given by the beneficial microbes which are naturally present in many environments. So all these things are clearly showing us that to arrive to a sustainable agriculture, we have to push a lot in research and innovation. And this is really the crucial message that I would like to give to all the PhD students, since really we need of interdisciplinary research and innovation coming from all the different studies, just to arrive to a sustainable condition. And for that, thanks for your attention.
Thank you so much for an enlightening talk. Now the floor is open for questions. Please feel free to raise your hand and we will allow you to speak. We have a question written by Jihad Sada. Please
Yes.
raise your hand if you would like to speak.
I cannot see the chat. The chat.
I'm going to read it out loud. So Jihad says, plants only require ions and CO2 and light, right? The microorganism's task is to liberate inorganic matter from the organic matter. We can bypass the microbial composting with artificial blend of ions. Is this an okay statement? What do you think about solution based on hydroponics and aeroponics, even replacing solar spectrum with LED spectrum to the photosynthesis? And he has a physics background.
Eman, sorry, but I would like, if it's possible, to read by myself, but I cannot read, I cannot see anything on webinar chat, since I cannot see the chat.
Can you see Q&A? Q&A, it's under Q&A, not in the chat.
Q&A, I cannot see, since I have nothing in my chat.
It's not under chat, it's under Q&A. There is another section.
Yes, Q&A, yes. Yes, I have seen. Sorry, right. Yes, so it's a quite difficult. Theoretically, it's true, the question posed by Jihad. I mean that that the microorganism uses the organic matter released by plants. But it is also true that if we bypass the microbial composting with ions, we came back to the idea of fertilizers. Do you agree with me? So by contrast, at the basis of a microbial revolution, there is the idea that we use the natural resources and the capacity of microbes to uptake with higher efficiency nitrogen, phosphate, or potassium as far as concerned with mycorrhizal fungi, or the unbelievable capacity of rhizobia to fix nitrogen, since we do not know any other microbes which can fix nitrogen, since the triple links of the nitrogen molecules is so that only the nitrogenase of bacterial origin can break these links. So my opinion is that using an artificial blend of ions, theoretically, yes, is correct, but in my opinion, this is not so diverse from the fertilization. So I will be really very curious to have your comment on that. And on the solution based on hydroponics, yes, this is sure a good suggestion, but again, this is true for limited crop management, mostly performed under greenhouses. And so this is okay, sure, since in this way we have excellent demonstration of good productivity by using a limited quantity of water. The dropping system is really very, very efficient, as well as the hydroponics. Lastly, the replacing solar spectrum with LED spectrum tuned to photosynthesis is really a quite interesting suggestion, and is really, so I fully agree with you, and for me is very interesting to see again, this of interdisciplinary that always solution physics students from or materials. For example, all the problem of artificial photosynthesis is developed in natural, science materials lab or in physics lab. So I fully agree.
We have a question from Eric. You can put it in the chat. That was amazing and inspiring talk.
Yes, if you want to read, yes, thank you.
Go ahead, and I would like you to answer it. He says, let me read it out loud for our audience, if you allow me. AM synthesis is a communicating way between fungi and plants, but how the plant could control the level of synthesis since there should be an optimal level of colonization. Also, if there is a level of fungi around the plants, what will happen to plants?
Hi, Eric. Nice to know that you are here. And yes, you know that there is this huge problem of auto-regulation of a symbiosis, which is now under studies in symbiosis, while by contrast it has already been phased and discussed for the nitrogen-fixing symbiosis. Since we know quite well that plants try to control the number of nodules which are produced, and exactly in the same way the plants try to limit the percentage of cells which are mycorrhized. So, in my opinion, in addition to the genetic tools that at the moment are really under investigations, so a lot of these proteins, and in this moment, really, I do not remember exactly the experiment where this has been faced. In my opinion, it is also quite important to take in consideration the phosphate transporter, the nitrate transporter of the plant, and of the fungus, which may act as probably exactly as the sensor which has been investigated in rice. Probably these transporters have the key to weight of phosphate which is present in the soil as well as inside the plant cell, and so probably this could act as a parallel regulation system just to check the quantity of fungus which is required to move required concentration of a mineral inside. But surely you are right, this aspect is still to be clearly investigated in the symbiosis.
We are 2 minutes over time. We still have 2 more questions. I just wanted to thank our audience, and Professor Bola, if you have time for these 2 questions, we will highly appreciate it.
There is still
one question. Let's take it.
Yes. Okay.
You have time, right? I just want to.
Yes.
All right.
Sure.
Amazing. Yeah. So we have a question from Nikas. He say, "Thank you for the talk. How do you picture the unfolding of the solutions in the microbial revolution? Would crops be planted with combination of plants like nitrogen fixing, or would microbes be added to the soil missing them?" to the
Yes,
soil?
thanks for this question, since this is giving us immediately a sort of direct application of these ideas of a microbial revolution. Since the idea that I have seen already applied in many projects is to use a double cultivation, and indeed to put a cereal, for example, with a legume, companion plants, and in this way there is immediately an increase in productivity. But not only this, since it seems that the presence of nitrogen fixing plants has an immediate feedback on the microbiota composition, and therefore you have also a secondary effect that there is a change in the microbiota, which on the other hand may have a positive impact on the first plant, for example, on the maize or on the wheat in which you are interested. But in addition, there are also other alternatives. And for example, in KAUST University, I know that a colleague of mine, Daniele Da Fontio, has found and then investigated the impact of many microbes which are very efficient for helping plants to resist to drought. And these microbes have been isolated from desertic plants, and indeed they provide a strong help in supporting this drought resistance. So the idea is that indeed you can apply different technologies, really moving from very ancient ones, since the idea to put together a cereal and one legume is a quite old technique. Already Romans, ancient Romans, were already doing that. But now this is strongly assisted by our knowledge on the specific microbiota. And so this is really quite important. But again, I would like to come back to one of my comments, that to do this, we have really to do a lot of basic science, just to understand which is the best match between the plants and the microbial community. The experiment on rice has clearly demonstrated the impact of a genotype. So for each variety, we have really to select the right microbiota. So I hope to have replied to this question.
Great answer. We have more questions coming on, but let's take Ishan first from the chat. He said, very interesting talk. Thanks a lot. How do you use the disparity between the overweight people and the malnourished people being 2 to 1 yearly? Also, with the microorganism related sustainable agriculture, what is the scale of reduction of industrial fertilizers that you can forecast, considering that fertilizers, etc., are the major source of our greenhouse gas emissions?
Yes, probably I have not seen this.
Go to the chat, you will see it there.
Yes, probably this one. I will go probably after that. I will try with this difficult one of Hamed, saying how we face the challenges to be real friends of our earth. It is hard to change it to the professional. Yes, yes, of course. Indeed, what I hope that you have understood my final message, that if we want to really to be real friends of our earth, we cannot use a single choice, but we have to be aware that this highly productive agriculture is really very stressing for our earth. But in the meantime, it is clear that we have still the problem to feed 9 billion of people in a few years. So of course, we have to consider the different conditions. And for that, in my opinion, it is really very important to say that we have that at this point, it is really important to have a vision, to have some quite far ideas. For example, it's for that I love the project of Giles Aldroyce, even if maybe it will be not so easy to arrive to a solution. But it is really our duty as a scientist, from the different type of studies and investigations, to have some ideas, some visions, and then to try to reach just to be real friends of our Earth. So I fully agree with your comments. Thanks again for that.
Jihad also has a
Yes,
follow-up question.
yes, probably come back. Yes, fix nitrogen from air, but other ions can deteriorate in soil. Yes, but the nitrogen, so I am not so sure to fully understand the question, since the nitrogen fixation is really located inside the nodules, which are inside the soil. So since the nitrogen, we know that the air, we have 80% of nitrogen, atmospheric nitrogen, but it is moving, it is present also in the soil. So the ions can deteriorate in soil. Of course, this at the end, these all the other nitrogen related metabolism are really the object of all the other bacteria and fungi which develop the typical nitrogen metabolic pathway. But in my opinion, this could be really already something of positive. But again, also in this case, which is only doing really a small part and not surely it not solve all the problems of agriculture. Probably you are much more expert than me in this practical application.
Jihad raised his hand. Please feel free to speak. Would you like
Hello,
to? Go ahead.
can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes.
Thanks a lot for the lecture. Very interesting. Let me rephrase my question. The microbial revolution would address the lack of nitrogen in the soil. So the microbes can fix the atmospheric nitrogen into ions that the plant can use.
Yes.
But this is only part of the problem. The other part of the problem still remain unresolved, which is how about the other ions, the potassium, the sulfate, the other micro ions or micronutrients.
Yes.
Microbes will not address these things, so we would keep relying on fertilizers to make up for the lost ions.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So, yes. No. I have better understood your question. The idea of beneficial microbes is that each type of microbes do a part of the work. So, for example, the rhizobia can fix nitrogen and therefore release ammonia directly to the plant. But the arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi are very active in releasing phosphate, even at the very, very low quantity, 30 micromole of phosphate in the soil. They can uptake this phosphate and release to the plant. And we have really a lot of knowledge on this type of mechanism. And at the same time, the same arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi can also uptake sulfate and potassium. And so it's for that the idea of this use of beneficial microbes is really to put together all these different microbes, since all of them has a specific activity. even if, as I tried to say, not all the fungi are really working at the same time and with the same efficiency with the same plant. So surely I agree with you that they are not the perfect solution, but the idea is that we can help the agriculture by using the natural resources which are really present in the soil, and indeed the activity mostly of these mycorrhizal fungi is really at the moment quite nicely established. And the fact that if you go to the market of the inocula, you can see that very often these inocula based on nitrogen fixing bacteria are now complemented with these inocula which have these different plant growth promoted bacteria or these mycorrhizal fungi, since the idea is that the community works better than the single microbes. But of course, I am sure that this is not a absolutely conclusive solution. As I told you, it's a sort of vision for the future.
It's a step in the right direction. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Now to Ishan comment under chat.
Yes, so I do not see other questions.
Under the chat, in a different section.
In the chat, so I am to see.
If you, it's next to the polls. You want me to read it again? Read the question again?
No, I cannot see. No, the chat, no, the... or, no.
Down there?
Chat,
in the bottom?
yes, see the disparity between the rate people. Yes. Yes, so thanks for this question, which of course is a question by Eshan Singh. The disparity between the overweight people and the malnourished people being 2.1, yes. And this is really what I tried to say, that there is this strong asymmetry. So it is clear that the production of this highly productive agriculture cannot solve the society problems, but this is strictly related to the governance, to the government. So what is my feeling is that the duty of the researchers is really to reveal these problems, but then of course scientists do not do policy, and so are the politicians, the governments, who have to take care of this fact. Since it is clear that in this moment there is food enough probably for everybody, but the asymmetry of the distribution is terrible, and we have seen this effect of asymmetry during the COVID lockdown, since the places where the distribution activity was strongly affected by the lockdown, there were really great problem to have this food security, where remember that food security is that the food has to be accessible to everywhere. By contrast, whether there is a sort of local production, and so the transport is not so important, the food security is probably more easier to be reached. And yes, and as far as concerned the second point, yes, I agree that probably with the microorganism related sustainable agriculture, we could also have a reduction in the source of greenhouse gas emissions. But as I tried to say that the production of greenhouse emissions is caused by agriculture, not directly in the moment in which agriculture is looking at the crop productivity, but when the livestock are strongly increased. And indeed, one of the first way to decrease the greenhouse gas emissions is to have a much more higher number of population eating vegetables than meat. This is the other obvious consequences of the story of microbial revolution.
Thank you so much for your generosity and giving us all this time. I would love to see you